We are speaking to Professor Kate Alexander, who's the co-author of Marikana, A View from the Mountain and a Case to Answer, as well as Sibusiso International South Africa, Amnesty International South Africa campaigner. Thank you so much to you both for your time. I'm going to begin with you, Sibusiso. 11 years on, and I wonder from your vantage point, what is making it so difficult for there to be full accountability for what happened in Marikana?
Good evening, Bungiwe, and good evening to the viewers, and good evening to you too, Kate. The issue is that when you look at, there's a culture of impunity, to be honest with you. That's the problem that we are facing as the country, and lack of accountability. And that's why, as Amnesty International, we believe that it's really, really unacceptable that after a decade and there's still no prosecutions, particularly if you look at the Scene 1 and Scene 2, which were the events that took place on this particular day in 2012. And the fact that, because basically what we are getting from the NPA and also as an IP, is basically what we can just regard as excuses, because IP, for instance, told us as Amnesty International South Africa that for them, they had to stop investigations during the Falam Commission, and they were only able to resume in 2016. And also they told us that they have like about 600 or less cases that are being investigated or have been investigated in terms of criminally or departmentally, that relates to the police that were on those particular scenes on the day.
Yeah.
And that they haven't really given us as in valid reasons as to why they haven't been conducting proper investigations. And also when it comes to the NPA side, they are blaming the lack of resources as to why things have delayed this much.
Prof, one wonders, when you look at the Marikana story, and one asks the questions, what are some of the impediments in your view, Sibusiso has shared his, that are making full accountability a difficulty?
Look, I think the main responsibility has to be held with the National Prosecuting Authority. They've been sitting on a mountain of evidence now for 11 years, and they haven't prosecuted anybody. They had IPID doing lots of work for them, interviewing people after the Commission of Inquiry reported, and yet they've done nothing. And they've done nothing in a situation where we know it's well established, it's a matter of common cause, that all of the 34 people who died on the 16th of August were killed by the police. They were killed by the police at two different scenes. In the first scene, the order to open fire was given by the commander in charge of operations for the day, Brigadier Kalitz. On the second occasion, which wasn't seen on the television, we know from what the evidence leaders said that there was an attempt to annihilate, that's their word, not my word, there was an attempt to annihilate those who they thought were enemies. In other words, the striking mine workers. And they simply surrounded those striking mine workers and shot at them. Some of the striking mine workers, we heard, had their hands up, some didn't have their hands up, but they were shot nevertheless. So all of these killings, these unlawful killings, were conducted by the police, and yet none of these police has yet had to face a judge in a court of law.
And as you talk about it, I mean, one thinks about even evidence that would have been presented by someone like Colonel Duncan Scott, for example, who was quite critical in drafting the plan, the dispersal plan that would have then been implemented on the day, and some of those that we are not seeing here being held to account. But Prof, I'm going to stay with you. You talk about what happened at Scene 2, and one really sat through the Commission's evidence, and it sends chills down one's spine even today. When you think about the fact that there were some who had cable ties face down, really looking like they were either fleeing, some of them shots in the back. These wounds will undoubtedly remain for as long as no one is also arrested and not even much is done by what happened there.
Yes, look, I was one of those who discovered, if you like, in quotes, Scene 2. And it was terrible, and I can't get it out of my memory, seeing the blood that was on the ground and seeing the blood that was on people's clothes. So it was horrific. There's no doubt whatsoever about it. But I think that when we think about the situation. We have 4 days that the police used to mobilize over 600 people to engage in these killings. And we know that the killings were planned. We don't know exactly how many were planned. I don't think the police had decided in advance precisely the number, but we know that they had decided that people would die in Marikana before the 16th, that the National Police Forum held on the 15th, and that was well established in the Farm Commission. 4 days it took to mobilize all those people by the government, by the Minister of Police. And now it's been 11 years and we still haven't had anybody prosecuted. 11 years and the government has failed to prosecute people. Now, isn't that a massive contrast? 4 days to kill people and 11 years and still people haven't been found responsible, prosecuted for what happened, and the wives and families of those who were killed have still not been compensated. So there's this massive disparity, massive injustice, and it's the government that's responsible for that. There's absolutely no doubt about that.
And Sibusiso, you know, one thinks about the story, 44 people being killed in total, and one thinks about even some of the people who died in the days before. You think about some of the security guards who were found with missing limbs, and some of the security guards, you know, found with missing body parts as well, and also what happened in the days before then. It begs the question, is it a lack of will to understand and to get to the bottom of what happened there and prosecute the people and ensure that everyone who is responsible is behind bars? Or is there anything else at play here, in your view?
Well, because if you try to be a bit fair in terms of the killings that took place before the 16th of August, you would know that there is some form of prosecution. Currently, there is about 6 police officers or former police officers who are going who are charged in terms of things like even including murder, and that's currently still going on in court. That relates to the incidents that took place before, and you'd remember the acquittal that took place also in 2021. But in terms of the events that took place on this particular day in 2012, we haven't seen any movement, and that basically, to us, it points to a lack of accountability, and which perpetuates the culture of impunity. And as Prof correctly pointed out, it's all in the NPA's. The NPA has to take full responsibility for as to why they haven't been able to prosecute in these particular matters. And what it tells us is that basically people can just do as they please, particularly if they are also part of the state. They can do as they please with no fear of sort of being held accountable or maybe prosecution, because there's no other way as to how can you explain as to why it has taken them this long for them to prosecute. Because even the reasons that they are emerging from the media when it comes to the NPA, which came out today, is like they are saying that there had been lack of capacity on their side. They haven't been able to process this particular evidence, which doesn't really give us much. It's not a valid reason, to be honest with you.
And, you know, also Sibusiso, questions even around the Investigative Police Directorate, for example, because the Independent Investigative Police Directorate, because they were also tasked with investigating the police officers that you can clearly see on footage, and that is captured by the media of the first incident when it comes to the shooting.
Yes, so with IP, one of the reasons that they provided to Amnesty International as to why there has been a delay, they are claiming that because obviously when the Farm Commission started, they had to stop, and in terms of the investigations, and they were only able to resume in 2016, and they've now handed over those particular cases. They said they handed them over late in 20. In fact, now you'll also ask yourself as to if they are saying that they handed the cases over to the NPA late in 2022, why are we now in August and there's still no sign of any prosecution, for instance? And so those are some of the reasons. And also what they're saying, that is something that they were saying to us, is something that we should also perhaps acknowledge is the fact that they are dealing with about 600 or less, because there were 600 or less police officers present there, and they are saying that that's the number of cases that they are looking at, and they are looking at the investigations are either criminally or are either criminal investigations or departmental investigations that have been taking place. So it's basically those kind of reasons that we've been gating, but basically if you look at them, they don't really make much sense as to why we haven't seen any movement.
And Prof, one then wonders, when one looks at the findings of the Marikana Commission, the Farlam Commission as termed by some, others have called it a whitewash, others have called it a waste of time. Some have said that it was, it did well in terms of putting us in the picture of what happened there. And I wonder, which assertion are you leaning towards?
No, I don't think it was a whitewash, and nor do I think it was a waste of time. It was enormously expensive. I mean, the work that we conducted as academic researchers, which occurred prior to the Farlam Commission, cost something like 30,000 Rand. And we found out almost exactly the same as the Farlam Commission, which cost over 100 million Rand. And we did it much more quickly. So the Farlam Commission was very slow at doing its job, and it did it in the wrong order. It should have started off with the objective facts to do with where people were killed and how they were killed. And then it should have proceeded by interviewing, ensuring that the people who were present at the scene were interviewed, and then they could have followed up in terms of the facts. One of the most important pieces of evidence was a film that was put together by the South African Human Rights Commission, which showed very clearly the order of events on the 16th. And part of that was a demonstration of the way in which the police had killed the workers. Now, that was not produced at the Commission of Inquiry until very late in the day. So that meant that the police narrative was established in the minds of the commissioners and in the minds of the public for a very long period of time without it being adequately challenged. But I do think that the Farlam Commission was mealy-mouthed in its conclusion. It was pusillanimous in its conclusion. It could have been much firmer in saying that these people should be brought to court and charged with murder. And there are a number of people for whom there is clear evidence that they were responsible in some way or another for murder. And one of those was Ria Piega, the National Commissioner of Police. And there was an inquiry on her fitness to hold office, which was called for by the President Zuma, as a consequence of the Farlam Commission of Inquiry. And Khasa was much more forthright about the failings and the responsibilities of Piega. He said that she was the ranking officer in the National Police Forum, which met the day before the massacre, and which made the decision in advance of anything that happened on the 16th, made the decision that people should be surrounded and killed. So she was directly responsible for that decision. Khasa knows that. Piega knows that. Zuma will know that. And I see no reason whatsoever why she shouldn't be charged for murder and brought before a court immediately. I mean, it could happen tomorrow because the evidence is there. And there's even more evidence in the offices of the MPA that we haven't yet seen.